Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me, I got a full house. Welcome, Mac.
Good evening.
And Gio.
What's good, guys?
On today's pod, we're going to be going over some midweek action from around the Prem and tee up some exciting games to come this weekend. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is @houseof_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But let's get straight into it. Gio, Man U were again in action, and what a way to bounce back. It looked like a whole different team, even though there are only a couple changes to that starting 11, Mac, that you noted. But Gio, Man U, balling out a lot better in terms of link-up play and movement up front. Tell us how you saw this game.
Honestly, it was a great bounce back game in terms of the way they approached the game. The players just looked like they wanted to be there. And in terms of possession in the first half, it was quite lopsided. I believe it was up in the high 60s, almost 70s in terms of the possession. Shots on goal, Brentford didn't manage to get many shots on goal. It was 6 shots, 1 on target, which wasn't which in hindsight is very good if you can keep a team with Ivan Toney as your striker. So only 1 shot on target, I think that's an absolute win in that sense. But yeah, in general, the guys just look like they wanted to be there. It was more cohesive. They looked like they were moving off the ball much better, cutting into tackles much better. It was just, hopefully it was ETH after the Newcastle game kind of tearing them a new one because I think they really needed it. But yeah, now that they've won this game, although they won by a very narrow margin, and late in the game, there was a point where there was a turnover and De Gea was forced to make a tough save. So yeah, like a win is great, but still a lot that they could improve on in this game. Because it was only a 1-0 win. It could have been 1-1, maybe 2-1 Brentford. So you got to learn to limit your mistakes, but you'll take it after a tough loss against Newcastle, a poor performance, a poor team performance. But yeah, still a lot to work on. But with the likes of Christian Eriksen back at training and Casemiro likely to come back soon, it's always an upside to get 3 points.
Yeah, and though there weren't many changes in terms of personnel for that starting 11, Mac, what really changed for Man U? Because like Gio said, it must have been Erik ten Hag needing a reaction from that last game. It looked like the run of form wasn't going great, but now this still puts them back into the fourth spot, just above Spurs, who have a game played more than Man U. So how did you see this game?
I think it's tough to say in terms of, I don't want to give too much credit to Manchester United here because I feel like they definitely match the level of the team that they're placing. I would say argue between, did they play that much better than Newcastle? Yes, but Brentford are that much worse of a team than Newcastle where they are right now, where Manchester United, you're going to assume they're going to get most of possession. They're going to be able to create more opportunities playing at home against this Brentford side, whereas Newcastle, they're much more of a dominating team, can be a more dominating team in possession, in transition, in creating opportunities, whereas Brentford, they really have maybe one way to really impact the game, in my opinion, attacking wise. Of course, they're very, very gritty. They're very comfortable at set pieces. They're very comfortable going long. So if you can manage that, the rest of the game should be fairly comfortable. But they're so good at that it can be difficult to kind of go against this Brentford team. So I feel like it was a good matchup if you can handle that, which you want to be able to give a lot of credit to the defensive work between both Varane and Martinez there, because defensively, if they're strong enough and playing well enough at the back, at the end of the day, they're going to be able to create enough opportunities going forward for this Man Manchester United team where eventually something's going to come their way. On the positive, though, even though they ended up only scoring one goal, it was nice to see a lot of different players at least have opportunities, because it seemed like over the recent couple, let's say, months, it's really just been kind of Rashford and that's it. On the odd end, you might get one or two players scoring that one goal, or maybe getting a kind of a half chance. For this one, there was a linear of players. You had Anthony, Sancho, Sabitzer, even Fred, when he came on late, had a great opportunity to score. So it's nice to see there is more of an attacking presence there, where unfortunately, no one else got on the score sheet, but you saw players in positions that down the road, if you kind of re-roll the dice again, maybe luck goes their way and they can kind of get on the score sheet there. So I think that's the major positive, is what there was a lot more attacking threat. But you can still, I would argue, it's a good step forward, but it's not a large leap, I would say.
That's interesting to note, because obviously they dropped their actual striker for this game, Gio, and so, there's always been concerns for Weghorst and how he's going to fit in that front line for Man U. Yes, he gives you some hold-up play, but in this game, Man U looked like they had more of a threat going behind, and like Max said, there were chances for the oncoming midfielders. I counted at least 5 cutback opportunities, top of the box. Anthony had probably 2, Scott McTominay, Fred. So, I don't know. What do you think is sort of the move forward? Will Weghorst be dropped from this point on, or was this a one-off game? What do you think sort of would be the best approach? Would it be game by game? What do you think?
I think it's always a game by game. I think like how we discussed it earlier, and how I think Mac jokingly said it, but it was almost kind of like a Marouane Fellaini type player, where the height is useful, and he does realistically do a job in the sense that he is almost pulling one center back out of the picture when he does play up front there. He is such a big target, so he does provide some sort of effect on the game. Now, does he do it well enough that it's making a huge difference? Some would argue no. But he does what he's technically supposed to. Now, I would still go by a game basis, but you still need, your other attacking players to prove that it needs to be a game by game basis. Ten Hag obviously has started him in many games, so he obviously has trust in what he's doing, and it doesn't affect his starts based on his goals, and that's very clear that Ten Hag trusts him to do what he's asked of on that pitch, and obviously what Ten Hag wants him to do, he is doing in order for him to continue to get those starts. So if these guys want to get more playing time out of him, away from him, then they're gonna have to, one, score some goals, or prove that they're effective on the pitch enough that you can take his minutes away from him.
Yeah, something interesting to note.
Yeah, so I wanted to jump in on that, because I think when you're playing against a team like Brentford, where how they press is kind of really in segments, and it's not kind of a comparison to like a Man City or a Liverpool or Arsenal press, where it's consistent, it's thorough, it's completely out through the full aspects of the pitch, where you can use De Gea a little bit more freely and be a little bit less concerned. Because it's weird for me to say is that the reason why Weghorst is important is because you have De Gea, considering that they play on opposite sides of the pitch. It's where De Gea is, as we all know, a great shot stopper, but he's not really great with his feet. And something that in our chat right, you're highlighting is that you pretty much had a heart attack. Is it secondhand anxiety attack?
For Gio, yes.
For Gio, I apologize. Yes. Or for any Manchester United fan out there, whenever they has the ball at his feet. But the reason why it's kind of a for me, it's kind of a domino effect, where Ten Hag's trying to solve problems. Like, if we're going to be able to play in possession, maybe we don't need Weghorst. We can kind of build up the back, see if we can be more creative. But against teams where we don't have that option and we can't really rely on De Gea to be as comfortable with his feet, we need to solve the problem of De Gea not being comfortable with his feet. We need a striker that's going to win that first ball. At the very least, we have a chance of retaining possession up the field, because we're not as comfortable building up from the back, given kind of where we are right now. So it's kind of like I said, that domino effect, and maybe on those individual matchups where he sees more of a fit, or more of a matchup where, hey, if there's an opportunity, we can isolate Rashford, probably our best one-on-one player this season, we want to get behind on kind of a winger side, then we have this player as an option, because he's used both Weghorst as a 10 and as a 9, depending on the matchup. So it's really, I guess, it's just another tool in his tool belt, depending on the teams that he's playing. But I feel like he can definitely serve a role. And I know a lot of people bashed on that couple seasons for Fellaini for Manchester United, that him being that type of high level technical player that is all encompassing midfield that maybe you would want from a Manchester United midfield, but they play a role, and you got to be able to. You got to give them the credit that if they're going to be given that task, it's something they can complete. So full respect to that, and hopefully going forward, Ten Hag picks and chooses the right games for Weghorst to be utilized, and as well as to not. Hopefully, the other players can step up and make it more of a competition of who's going to come out and play.
Yeah, and games are coming thick and fast. Gio, Man U are at home to a desperate Everton on Saturday, and we saw Everton get a decent draw against Spurs. Man U will look to continue to make that push to cement their position in the top four. What do you see happening in this game, Jim?
Look, as long as you're a Man United fan, you can't count any team out. Just like you shouldn't have counted Brentford out, although the analytics would count them out. You can't count Everton out either. I think it was the season when Everton beat them. Although Everton hasn't been great, Man U hasn't been great playing these lower table sides. And again, this is a different Everton side. So if that struggling Everton side earlier on in the season beat you, who's to say this one isn't going to beat you? So they, especially the Sean Dyche coach side, I think. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for them. Again, it's going to be won and lost in the midfield. Again, very physical midfield they have. So I would expect this much more of the same. And again, we know what the whole team is capable of. Even if Keane can score a goal like that, they'll be very excited to keep on shooting. So expect a lot of shots on De Gea. So he'll have to be on his toes. And again, Rashford's going to have a Rashford game, I feel. He's going to be able to attack. But I'm more worried about everyone around him being able to contribute. Again, that's how he's gotten his goals. So what I really want to see is Anthony really create for others and, stop with this cut inside on the left foot and have a go, because it seems like that's his only weapon. How else are you going to contribute? So I'd be looking for him to see how he can add to his game, because everybody's going to be on Rashford regardless of the fact, and everybody's going to be on Bruno. So it's up to Anthony really to really prove himself and prove his value that they paid for him.
You're now looking at how the supporting cast is able to support Marcus Rashford up top. But I guess just to round up this part, Brentford, Mac, they had a decent season, still in 9th place, but looking very unlikely now that they'll finish in European positions. It looks like this was a 1-0 away loss to Man U at Old Trafford is not the end of the world, but I would have expected them to put a little more fight into it, especially considering they are now facing Newcastle in the upcoming weekend game, which we'll talk about shortly. But what are your thoughts on Brentford, and are they overperforming, underperforming, just where there should be? What are your thoughts?
So I feel like if you were to go into the season and you asked anyone part of the Brentford club if they finished 9th in the Premier League, would they think this is the successful season? Would they take it? Absolutely. This has been a great season for them, the smallest club in the Premier League, doing this well, being a threat, picking up fantastic victories, kind of really making a name for themselves. And they haven't really gone out in the transfer market and spent like a lot of the other teams below them, right? Where you see players like Nottingham Forest literally signed everybody and their mother. Brentford have gone about it in a different way and have been so vastly more successful, right? So just be able to use that as a comparison. So you got to be really happy if you're a Brentford fan with what they have done and what they could potentially continue to do. And this is definitely a season to remember. I would argue that I think European contention right now, of course, is a step a little bit too far. Arguably, because they have the exact same points as Liverpool at this point, playing one extra game. So, if again, you got to be happy. You can't expect too much there, in my opinion. But I think everyone else above them, the Aston Villas, the Brightons, even though Liverpool still, I know we're going to talk about them later. They're still in with the shout. It's too far. It's not too far gone for them. Whereas for me, for Brentford, it's a little bit too much. I do want to touch on the Everton Man United game though, is because it'll be interesting to see how the back line is structured for Everton, because they're going to be missing one Doucouré who plays in the midfield. So does that mean Tom Davies naturally comes in? And generally speaking, they've started with Ben Godfrey playing as a fullback instead of Mikalenko. But I feel like if Rashford's playing out on the wing, that Rashford versus a Seamus Coleman matchup might not be the greatest for Everton. So do we see him switch over to help cover Rashford on that side? It'd be interesting what Sean Dyche does in there and how he tries to deal with the threat that Manchester United can kind of pose. But what at least I would want to see from Manchester United is that hopefully they can play further up the pitch in this game, given the fact that Everton really don't have a way to, in my opinion, hold up the ball very well. They don't have a striker, not a natural one, unless Sims comes in, but we haven't seen enough of him to know if he has the quality to do that against a Man United team. So if I'm them, I'm at home. I'm in not just the opponent's half. I'm deep into the other opponent's half with my back line, and I think that's what something I would like to see them try to do, because they've generally been, in my opinion, a little bit more reserved in their press. This might be an opportunity to go all out.
That's fair. And so let's move on to another game we just talked about, Newcastle. Let's talk about Newcastle now, Mac. There was a time when we were thinking, Newcastle, they're struggling to score goals. They scored 5 goals in this game, Mac. Though, granted, they were helped by a couple of West Ham defenders. Maybe they're wearing some Newcastle jerseys underneath. But what were your thoughts on this game?
Absolutely. I guess the cure for them and their goal scoring prowess is just to get help from their team, and that ends up putting you in a good position, right? So Newcastle, to be fair though, from minute 1 on, they were very impressive. After 13 minutes, they get 2-0 lead, and kind of felt like the game was really already over, because Newcastle are so stout defensively. You can't envision them dropping 3 goals within one matchup against this West Ham team. So it felt, in my opinion, pretty much over at that point. They played very, very well individually up front. St. Maximin was giving everybody and their mother the work. Callum Wilson got the start in this matchup after Isak had started in the previous match. So it's nice to see them having rotation and Wilson getting on the score sheet. That's nice for his confidence. And Isak as well, when he did come on later, even though it was a gift, he got on the score sheet again as well. So overall from Newcastle, a great performance, and something they definitely needed, because it further cements them being in position in the top 3. And if all goes well for them, they can fairly easily finish 3rd.
That's great for Newcastle, but on the flip side, Gio, we've seen a couple of managers get sacked, and we kind of predicted, Brendan Rodgers potentially due to the run of form. David Moyes, another manager that we kind of talked about through this season, he's in a tough spot right now. Definitely not where they would want it to be. In the standings, they are currently 15th, but they're actually tied with Bournemouth, who's 18th in the relegation battle. So not looking great. Will there potentially be a managerial change here? What are your thoughts?
Look, there's not. I wouldn't say there's too many games left, but I think the best thing is to see it out. Look, they're in a tough position. But again, they're in a relegation battle where one win kind of changes everything. It kind of takes you out of that zone. So, are there games coming up that they can get points from? Absolutely. I think firing him at this point or letting him go would be, the wrong time. It'd be a panic, and it would kind of almost, if the players do believe in him, or if the board does believe in him, like they said, it'd be a shock to many people. Probably not the type of media they need around them in time of struggle. So I think they need to see it out. Again, I think the club almost owes it to him to let him play it out, and then in the summertime, if that's the case, then then they kind of part ways from there.
Yeah, I would agree as well. It's just just looking at him with the mistakes that West Ham defenders pretty much gave goals to the Newcastle players, he just looked defeated and not the greatest sort of performance for your coach in that situation, especially at home. So, Mac, West Ham are facing Fulham, which you can consider is a London derby, because they are both in London. Fulham are without Mitrovic, so that could be a plus for West Ham. But Fulham have been performing quite well this season as well, though they did lose in their last game. So two teams that are looking to bounce back. How do you see this game playing out this weekend?
I think this will be a tough game for both teams, given the situations. Vinicius has come in for Mitrovic on occasion, has performed decently well. So I think even though Mitrovic is a big miss, it's not that drastic of a drop off in my opinion, given the quality of the strikers. I think though West Ham are in a position where they need to come out and at least get something out of this game. As Gio said, there are not that many games coming around, but West Ham still have going forward. They have to play at home to Arsenal. They have to play at home to Liverpool. They have to go away to Man City and play home against Man U. That's out of their 9 remaining games. 4 of them, you would argue, are facing better squads, right? And in competition against Crystal Palace, Leeds, and Leicester, and Brentford as well. So there's no easy walk in the park, I would argue, outside of maybe, depending on the day, Leeds can kind of be porous in net, kind of in terms of conceding goals. Every other matchup that they're going to face, theoretically, could be really, really tough. So I think they need to, this might be, it's tough to say when they're facing a London derby away from home. This might be one of their easier matchups to potentially get points. So I feel like this has the potential to kind of see them out because there are so many teams kind of grouped up at the bottom where even though they did lose this game over the last couple of weeks, they have slowly climbed up. So if they're able to pick up one here, it gives them a little bit of breathing room. So if they go ahead and face Arsenal in the following, which I hope they lose, it's not as bad. So that's more so, I guess, where I'm coming from is that this matchup is vital for Man City, and they need to at least come out with a point, in my opinion.
Definitely West Ham looking nowhere but up because at this point you're fighting for your status in the Premier League, and you got to do yourself some favors, play for your coach at the very least, and put in a performance for the fans as well. So we'll see how they get through to the last couple of games. At that point, let's take a quick break here, boys, and then we'll be back with some more Premier League action to talk about. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We're going to continue our Premier League talk with Chelsea 0, Liverpool 0. A game that wasn't all that exciting in the end. A lot of chances, you can say, definitely for Chelsea, and some goals that were called back. And Chelsea might feel like they were disappointed in not getting a positive result here with the 3 points. But on the flip side, not a loss, and especially with a caretaker manager right now, I don't think it's the end of the world. It is interesting though, some of the changes that happened for both teams, and from looking at the starting lineups for Liverpool, I'm sure you guys saw it. I posted in the group. Klopp had my attention. He dropped Van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Salah didn't start the game, and so that I think was a quite a statement. Whether it was because Liverpool played a couple of days ago, that could be. But Curtis Jones was called in, I think, just to have some more energy and legs in that midfield, and I think he did okay for an appearance here. But on the flip side, N'Golo Kante started for Chelsea and looked good. Didn't look like he missed a step. And the back three was featured Wesley Fofana for Chelsea, and that pushed Reece James into a right wing back position, Mac, and it looked a little more cohesive for them in this game. What are your takes?
Absolutely. So overall, throughout this game, I have to be completely honest. In terms of the level of quality we should expect from these two teams, this game was a slog. It was painful, and I would have rather spent my time watching any of the other Premier League games that played in the XX. I'd rather watch Brighton was a much better watch. So going forward, if these two teams are playing and Brighton's on, I'd rather check out them because these two teams, in my opinion, Chelsea did perform better overall on average, created more opportunities, looked like a team with more attacking threat, but have absolutely no ability to put the ball in the back unless they're offside or they want to use their hands like Havertz. I don't know. And when these two teams face each other, this is now the 4th time in a row in all competitions they played a goalless match against each other. So next season, when they play, I'm not watching. I'm going to save my time. I'm going to go do something else and enjoy my life. Life will be better. So going forward, that's what, in terms of this individual game, that was the first thing that came through my mind. It was painful because it will. You could see what they're trying to do in a lot of different ways in terms of Chelsea and their build-up players they want to try to isolate. There's a couple times where you thought maybe like Havertz or Shaw Felix could have been an opportunity to kind of create something in the final third. Things just didn't come off. Or Ben Chilwell, Reece James, they got a ball up at the pitch in terms of the wing-back position, and it seemed like a good plan. On the break, Nunes at certain moments looked like a threat, but there was nothing conclusive that you can currently drag out from either teams to show as progress. I do agree with you. The statement from Klopp is where, hey, this last game, that was kind of a horrible performance. We're going to do kind of a whole line change here. It really felt like in basketball, where the first couple of minutes the coach doesn't like to play, he takes out all 5 players at the same time to send a message to the rest of the team. So maybe that going forward, Liverpool can kind of wake up and be like, hey, you know what? If we're not going to kind of just like shoehorn people in to automatically play every minute if you're not performing. So it's maybe nice to see that, and maybe we'll see change from going forward. But overall, for me, from this game, it kind of just left me very sad that both teams are kind of where they are at the current moment, unfortunately. Even Conte coming in, which is great because he's a great player. I don't think there's a single person in the universe who does not like N'Golo Conte, but it came at the expense of Mudryk, which was their big summer January window signing, right? So again, it's very tough to drag a whole lot of positives from either teams in this game, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Very, very confusing all around. One disclaimer I would have is, these teams did play a couple of days before that Chelsea Liverpool game, so and because it was always going to be a high intensity game, the quality I can understand why it wasn't at the top quality that they normally play at or were used to, but still that doesn't give you an excuse to go away from that. And to give you guys an example of how weird it was going into this game, I was looking at not that I'm a betting man, but I was looking at the odds to see who was favorite for this game, and the odds were actually, I think, in favor for Liverpool. But when I actually started watching the game on Fubo, we watch Premier League games on Fubo, they gave, I believe, Chelsea the more odds to win. So I don't know. I think no one really knows what's happening with these two teams, and that further sort of encapsulates that itself. Gio, one of the more disappointing performances, I think, would be from Kai Havertz, who, he's not an out-and-out striker, but the run of form that he's been in, the couple of breakaway chances that he had, the goal that he did put in went off of his hand, and it just looks like he's on a bad run of form, bad luck all around. Mm-hmm. Would you drop Havertz if you're the Chelsea manager at this point? What changes can you bring for that front line?
They need someone to just put a goal in and just gain the confidence. Whether you would drop him or not, and it's not to say that he's the only one not scoring, because he's not the only one who's not scoring and scoring easy chances like that. Again, Mudryk missed several opportunities to put easy ones at the back of the net. So, who's to blame there? And again, Conor Gallagher, another guy who's had a fair amount of chances in front of net, has missed them. Kovacic even skied one, who had a great chance and skied it right over the net. Yes, he's not the scoring guy, but you guys are professional footballers. You are paid to put balls into the back of the net. You are paid to make tackles. You are paid to pass the ball at a very high rate and at a very high quality. So in terms of, whether you take him in or out, I don't think it's really going to change anything. It's the whole team that doesn't, the team has to buy in to whatever they're trying to do. And it doesn't seem like they have completely bought in, or like maybe half the players have bought in and half the players haven't. Again, tough that Graham Potter had to, this had to happen to Graham Potter. But again, like I know we'll talk about this a little later, but with the interim coming in, we won't say who yet. With the interim coming in, maybe he can get the best out of the guys that he did work with. Maybe that'll spark a change, but I'm not going to say too much about that just yet.
You know what? Let's get straight into it, Mac. Interim manager has been announced for Chelsea until the end of the season. Frank Lampard. I have no idea what's going on there, because obviously we know Frank Lampard was let go from this exact position due to poor performances. And do you really expect him, having performed poorly with a struggling Everton side, now with Chelsea? I still can't wrap my head around that. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
If I could put nepotism into a situation, it's basically that, because he's a son of the club. In all actuality, he's their most iconic player, arguably their best player that hasn't had some sort of stain on their reputation, a la John Terry. So you got to be able to be in a position where, if him wanting to be a manager, if you can have a caretaker, he's not the worst option. In that manner, because you can go in, just bring some joyness to the club, some happiness, put a smile on a couple of faces. Mason Mount, who's not playing at all, probably is happy to see him. So maybe that's a positive. And I think what the difference should be, because this is the exact same position in all actuality when they were a couple years ago, when he was in a similar situation where he come on to a struggling Chelsea team, brought some level of clarity, but then suddenly was hired as a full-time job, similar to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer with Manchester United. So I think what they should do is give him a couple months, bring maybe a little bit of a positive feeling back. Maybe he can figure a way to put 52 people on a pitch and do training properly. And in the summer, reset with a different manager with more of a long-term philosophy. That's the hope. But if you ask me if Todd Bowley's like, he's a fan of Chelsea too and likes Lampard, and Lampard wins out of the last 8 games, 6 of them, so they look like they're improving, then he signed off for the end of the year, and then we're in the same position again next year, would I be surprised? Absolutely not. Everything's possible with this. I think, like I said, the only I guess the bright spot that I kind of enjoyed in regards to Lampard when he was coaching at Chelsea is that he did really play the young players and didn't mind benching certain players that he didn't feel like fit the system. And that coming back into this Chelsea team, I think, is kind of what's needed, because Graham Potter was under a lot of pressure to play all of his big name signings, right? Where, okay, we're going to give Mudryk more leeway. We're going to be able to make sure Joao Felix is playing as many minutes as possible. Players like that, where Lampard can come in like, hey, the players I cared about, you've already got rid of a couple of them, but I'm going to go back to I know what works well for me in the Premier League and try to bring some level of competence back to this club, and a level of standard where, hey, we're still performing in the right way. So I feel like it can come. This could end up horribly, in which is what did originally, but there is a chance, if people are smart, it doesn't mess things up for them going forward.
I love how you're saying, hey, if I'm Frank Lampard, I'm sticking to what worked for me in the Premier League. But Gio, what has really worked for Frank Lampard in the Premier League? I know that Gio, you weren't the most impressed with his time at Everton, and my question, tongue in cheek, I think is a fun joke. Is Lampard one of those managers now that's actually expected to be sacked before the end of the season, even though he just got the job? Most likely not, but they do have a game to come against Wolves, who are still, again, in sort of that relegation battle zone. 28 points, 1 point from safety at this stage. And like Max said, Lampard has introduced younger players coming through. Mason Mount, definitely one of those players. Do you see a whole lot of changes from this Chelsea team heading into the weekend? Whereas Wolves are 14th, up and down run of form. Haven't really had so no wins in the last 3 games, and actually just 1 win in the last 5. And so they might be looking like a team that they're out to be got at. Do you think Lampard changes it and goes for more of an attacking style team?
I think he should. I think the best way for them right now is a strong offense, is a good defense. Because sometimes when we watch the games, we see the defensive mistakes and we're like, how can this happen? Again, they have a great defender sitting on the bench. Koulibaly hasn't been great this season. Cucurella hasn't been great this season. I mean, the only staple guy I think that should be in that back line is Thiago Silva, and sorry, the guy on the bench's name is blanking right now. But
Benoit Badiashile?
Badiashile. He definitely should be on. But why he's not playing is shocking. So yeah,
because Cucurella has.
If he changes that, great. But if he changes that, great. But I think for now, they're missing very close chances. They just need that slight edge, and I think they just need to go for it. Again, if you score goals, you somewhat are less pressured on the defensive end. So hopefully, he wakes some of the older guys that he's worked with up, in particular Mason Mount, who again is pretty much his son. So I'm sure he'll start getting minutes again, and hopefully he earns some value, and maybe God willing, Liverpool overspends on him.
Hey, maybe he'll give us some tips on how to score from midfield, because we know Frank Lampard loved a goal from midfield, and Chelsea definitely needed. But a team that will definitely need a goal in their game, both teams actually. Liverpool, we talked about, will be facing Arsenal at Anfield, Mac, and huge showdown for both teams, as Liverpool still trying to chase the top 4 position. But Arsenal, can cement yet another sort of accomplishment this season if they get all 3 points at a away ground like Anfield. So what are your takes for this upcoming game?
I have a quick trivia for you guys. So the last time Arsenal won at Anfield, do you know who the man of the match was for Arsenal? I'll give you 1,000 guesses. You would never get it right. But if I give you one hint,
I know.
If I give you one hint, you know? Oh, so you okay? Gio. Do you? If I give you one hint, I think you'll be able to get the player.
Yeah, let's get the one hint.
But if I get he's made of glass.
Oh,
never mind. So you don't know.
I don't know.
An Arsenal player made of glass in history that we look back on. He plays in the midfield. People compare...
Jack Wilshere.
No. This guy was made of even thinner glass. It's Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi was the man of the match for Arsenal. When last time Arsenal beat Liverpool at Anfield. So the odds are really historically in their favor here in terms of this matchup. It's never been a matchup that they performed very, very well in. It's been a tough place for them to be able to go. But Arsenal are in a position where they do know all 3 points. And they may not have Abu Dhabi today or going forward for this weekend. But I feel like they start out in a very good position. It'll be interesting to see in terms of Liverpool how many changes they make going into this matchup, considering how they performed against Chelsea, or if they go back more into the rotation of the team that they faced against Manchester City. My thought process is if you're Klopp, realistically the odds came out in terms of are they going to make a top 4 position? It's not in your favor. Do you really want to help City win another Premier League title here? I think you guys let's have some injuries. Let's tank a little bit, to use this like a basketball term. People need to. They have what do they call it again in basketball again when people sit when they're just tired and they want to play again?
Just rest.
Yeah, rest. What? No, there's things that Kawhi Leonard would call it. Load management. We need load management this game, boys. We don't need to play. Let's play with 9 people instead. We don't need a full 11 for this lineup, right? So I think that's the mentality Klopp should go in. But in all seriousness, I think the most interesting part in this individual matchup, because Liverpool did play well against Arsenal in the initial matchup, a 3-2 win for Arsenal, but they just edged it out. And Liverpool were very clinical in certain moments and did a great job in terms of dissecting areas defensively against Arsenal. I think what's interesting, and it might be an underrated matchup, is that Saliba's slated to not actually play. So we're going to get another Rob Holding matchup. So if there is a Nunez, I'll be honest, I'll probably favor Nunez in that matchup 1-on-1 against Rob Holding on a break. It very likely could happen 2 or 3 times. So I think that's going to be very, very key for Liverpool, is when they do get out on a press and Nunez or one of their strikers are isolated against one of these Arsenal defenders that are playing heavy minutes now because there's very little rotation going into that back line with both Tomiyasu and Saliba out. They might be able to feed. So I think that's where, if Liverpool are able to expose Arsenal in that manner, they could come out with a positive result. Otherwise, I know that Arsenal up front, they're going to score. They're going to play well. The question is, can Liverpool keep up that tempo with them?
Yeah, I would actually flip it on the other way around. I think as well, Arsenal, the way they're playing this season, and Liverpool, how susceptible they are at the back, Arsenal will score. It's just, are you able to keep the pressure up and pick moments in time to really just kill the game and kill the crowd at Anfield to use to your favor. Because I feel the way that Arsenal attack, they're very, very well balanced on both sides. They can hit you with overlapping runs on the left-hand side, as we know, with Xhaka, Zinchenko, Martinelli. And on the right-hand side, Ben White has been getting in the goals recently. Saka, as we know, is a threat. And Odegaard has been adding a couple of goals himself. So all around a well-rounded team and attack up front. I do expect to see a lot of changes for Liverpool. Van Dijk and Alexander-Arnold to start, and Salah as well in this game. And with the Anfield crowd, I do expect them to put in a better performance. But whether that will happen, I guess it's up to Gio to decide. Gio, what do you think will happen in this game?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. Just because, honestly, to what you guys said, I like that Klopp, switch things up. But I think Arsenal will eventually have their way. Just like Man City had their way, Arsenal will eventually work their magic, and this Liverpool side will get tired, and the holes will start opening up, and Arsenal will exploit those holes. So I think Arsenal's gonna it's gonna take a little bit of time, but I think throughout the game, as the game goes on, I think Arsenal will just outclass them, just like Man City did.
Yeah, they definitely have the quality, and like you said, I do expect a strong start from Liverpool because they are at home. But if Arsenal, Mac, can sort of sustain that pressure early on, I have no doubts that Arsenal will be able to find their chances going forward, considering how leaky Liverpool have been at the back. And if you have Trent Alexander-Arnold playing a right back, that's definitely a spot that we already saw Gabriel Martinelli, I think, scoring in the reverse fixture, taking his goal well, and even Gabriel Jesus, who was performing well, coming back into the team in their last game. So final predictions for this game for you, Mac, and then we'll do myself and then Gio.
3-1 Arsenal. I think Tsimikas might start. If Tsimikas starts on the left for a left back position, I think Saka can feast on him. And then same thing on the other side. Versus, I think Robertson might be a little bit more difficult to handle, depending on if he's playing. And that individual matchup, I think for me is going to be very, very key, because if Saka plays well, Arsenal tend to not lose. Whereas that might give a closer scoreline. But if it's Tsimikas, which I think it's going to be, I'm going to go 3-1 Arsenal.
Okay, I agree with the winning team. I think it is going to be Arsenal. I do think, though, it will be a little closer. I do expect Liverpool to score 1 goal, and with an Arsenal win, that leaves me to 2-1 Arsenal for my prediction. I just think Arsenal will have just too much to be dealt with by Liverpool, and so that's the result I expect. And Gio, to round it off, what do you expect?
I think this is rare, but I think I have to agree with Mac again here. I would see a 3-1 win, Arsenal. Look, they have been on it pretty much the entire season. I think they can do it again. They haven't, although they've showed signs of bending and kind of falling out of form, they haven't broken, gotten in a rhythm of playing poorly. So they adjust well. I think they'll adjust well in game as well if Liverpool decides to do something that isn't typical Liverpool. I think Arsenal have, obviously with Arteta, he's able to get the best out of his guys. So I think they'll be able to manage just fine.
Yeah, and time and time again this season, Arsenal have had games where they've sort of broken previous curses. That Anfield curse could definitely be broken this time around, and we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. So we're going to take one last break here, guys, and then we'll be back to chat on the relegation battle happening. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We're going to finish off the podcast for today, chatting a little bit about the relegation battle down at the Premier League table. And crazy stat, 7 points separates 20th through 12th in the Premier League. all teams except for West Ham having played 29 games. West Ham do have a game in hand, but not a lot separating them. And with the fixtures that are coming up, Leeds are taking on Crystal Palace. Leicester are facing Bournemouth. Southampton are are home to City. We mentioned already Fulham and is facing West Ham, and Aston Villa is facing Nottingham Forest. There's a lot that could change, but I guess to make it a little more fun, Max suggested we talk about sort of a team that we think would come out in the worst position this weekend. And based on the fixtures I just mentioned, I'm going to go first. I think it's going to be Nottingham Forest, actually. Nottingham Forest coming off of a loss against Leeds, another struggling side, just this midweek. And as we know, Aston Villa have been playing very, very well. I don't see a positive result coming from Nottingham Forest, and with other teams potentially in around them, potentially Leeds gets a win over Crystal Palace, Leicester gets a win maybe over Bournemouth, and then they are sort of more they leapfrog them, and then Nottingham Forest with their loss, I fully expect them to drop down even further. So yeah, Nottingham Forest not looking great for them, even though they did have an uptick in form. June might not be the happiest, but that's my prediction. What about you, Gio? Which team do you think will come out of this weekend in a worse position than they are now?
I would have to say a team that's kind of already in the relegation zone, Bournemouth. I think they'll drop even further down that line. I think Leicester, again, in a way, they were unlucky to lose that game, yeah, I thought there were times that they showed that they could have won. Again, Harvey Barnes, what a goal! I just like to point that out. That was amazing. My jaw dropped when I saw that. Great first touch. Obviously, he beat an old man. That actually young might as well be in a wheelchair at that point. He is that old, folks. But yeah,
his name is young though.
His name is young, right?
Yeah.
But. All credits to Harvey Barnes. That was an amazing goal. I think Leicester, again, obviously after the firing of Brendan Rodgers, I think they have a lot to prove themselves still, and I think this is a very winnable game. Of course, they play Bournemouth. Bournemouth, we know, like to attack early and can score against big clubs. We've seen them, fight City. We've seen them fight Spurs. And although they lost those games, I think it's important that they are able to compete with those bigger clubs. So Leicester having a tough season, it's very well that it can go completely the opposite way. But I think Leicester are one of those teams that have a lot to prove again, so they can dig themselves out of the relegation zone. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for them.
I feel like that game's a must-win for them. If they cannot tie it, they can't lose it for Leicester, because they're in a position right now where they're still a couple points behind, because most of the teams are in between that 27 to 30 point range in a relegation, so that are kind of in relegation positions, whereas they're at 25, so there is that couple point gap difference. So this, I feel like, is an absolute must win, which is tough because you're talking about a management side that's come in for their second game since Brendan Rodgers has left, right? So it's kind of an all or nothing, and it'll be interesting to see. I wonder, because in the first matchup, if I recall correctly, they started Jamie Vardy once again up top. Do they just continue to go back to old reliable and put him up there and well? And if we're going to go down, we're going to go down with him playing. I think that's more of an interesting viewpoint, is like, hey, it is what it is at that point. Because this, for me, for the rest of the season, this is their most important game of the season thus far. So I feel like they absolutely have to win. For me, though, in terms of a team where it's tough, where I feel like they could be in a kind of a worse position than where they started off on the weekend. And I'm really going to, I think the saying is you kick a dead horse when it's down, or no? Is that the saying? Or shoot a head door. Anyway, the dead horse is going to get beat up, okay? Because Southampton, they're out of it after this week. Because it's not even just the fact that they're not going to pick up any points against City, is that they're going to be ruined goal difference. I think that might be, because points are so tight, where I feel like that could be the deciding factor at the end of the season, is the goal difference between these bottom teams. And if that's the case, you don't want to face City, because guess what? they are very likely or potentially to rock these bottom teams. Like under these pep teams against this relegation side throughout history, the Premier Leagues there's full of 4-0, 5-0, 6-0 sweepaways, as if it's kind of like with disgust to a peasant, right? So you could very easily see that happen in this matchup where Southampton are, yes, okay, we didn't pick up any points. Maybe other teams around us didn't, but now we may have the worst goal difference out of everybody else. So in effect, instead of being 3 points behind, we're 4 points behind, right? Something of that manner. So I think for me, it could be their funeral game. If they were in the NBA, City players would be dressed in all black, showing up to the game. I think that's what they do, right? So for me, I'm terribly concerned about them and how this matchup will kind of kick them out of the sidelines. At the very least, though, that probably means we can stop talking about them, which we know. We've tried to put them to bed a couple times this year. Collectively, as a unit, us three is like, yeah, they can go down next. And then they pull up a couple wins. We're like, shit, we have to talk about it again. So it's like, it's very conflicting. So I feel like this, hopefully, even though, again, if Southampton win, out of any of us here, who would celebrate the most? Probably me, right? So even though I don't think that's going to happen, so I think that at the end of the day, at the end of this weekend, Southampton are going to be in a horrible spot.
And to add to insult to injury, someone recovering from injury, Erling Haaland was pictured back in training for Man City mid-weekend. So you just know he's going to come on he likely will start, get his 3 goals in 20 minutes, and then, hey, who knows, Alvarez will maybe come on and finish it.
Well, that's my question for you. Over, under 2.5 goals, Erling Haaland against Southampton. Over, under.
Over.
Without blinking. Oh, okay.
Again, boys.
Yeah.
Again, boys. Life's too short to bet the under.
No gambling advice. Okay. Sorry.
With that being said, we've seen some crazy scorelines this year. Man U, Liverpool.
Hey.
As well, Liverpool, Bournemouth. Could this be a record breaker? Could Man City hit double digits in this game?
I don't. Stop this. We do not need this. Okay, Arsenal have closed the goal difference to 2. Okay, as of right now, we do not need this. Stop it. How dare you? But yes, it could very well happen.
I would confidently say that they win by a 5-goal margin.
Fair. I don't think I would bet against that for sure.
Minimum 5-goal margin. I think they outclass them in any aspect. I would be shocked if
I disagree with any aspect. Set pieces, but Ward-Prowse though, set pieces.
I don't think City will not have the ball.
Yeah, that's right.
Long enough for them to foul James Ward-Prowse in a dangerous area. So, with that being said,
that's fair.
In all aspects,
Ward-Prowse is going to try a set piece from his own half because that's the only way. That's the only place City players end up fouling somebody, right? Is they're trying to get the ball back. So
there's no chance.
It's madness.
It's going to be a long afternoon for Southampton on Saturday when they do face Man City, and we're definitely going to cover all of that action in our next podcast. So I know we're going to conclude our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Tuesday when we review the weekend action from the Premier League and, bring you maybe the results for this Southampton Man City game that we fully expect Man City to win heavily. So on that note, thank you, Mac.
I can't wait for Klopp to say it was too rainy for them to play well.
Thank you, Jim.
Let's go, City.
See you guys soon.